Nice to see the ones of you who've been able to join so far. I'm going to take this time really just to share a little bit about what the course is about. And then we can, and I'll kind of talk to you about what people get out of it. And then we can just have a discussion and understand a little more about your backgrounds and what you're doing and what you're seeking to get out of this kind of a opportunity if you choose to do it. So without further ado, let me share my screen here. I'm going to share I just have a few slides here. So this is the office hours for Mastering Innovation Design Thinking. I co-teach it with a colleague of mine named Briza. This is happening in July, mid-July. We're looking forward to this class. We've been running it for several semesters. I guess we don't say semesters when we're talking about this kind of thing, for several years now. And it's been really fun and very successful, we thought, for a lot of different reasons. Partially, I think it's because the kind of customers that I and Riza have worked with, there are hundreds of them, but include some names like this that you'll know from either consumer packaged goods that you purchased or working with certain kinds of companies, people like FedEx or Apple, people like Sonos, if you're familiar with those kind of technologies, and Amtrak, but also products like Brita and Burt's Beeswax and Glad. And when we talk about innovation, we're not talking about it from an abstract perspective, because we've actually spent our careers working and our careers working academically. We're able to speak about this in a very credible way and provide really good stories and case studies about a whole bunch of these different brands. So we really make it come to life. To give you a little bit of background about to give you some understanding of my own background, I've been working in industry for about 25 years, I guess 26 now. And everything from different kinds of technologies like speech recognition and search. And I just started with video production and cybersecurity and social robotics. And I do consulting for companies now. And then for the past 17 years, I've been teaching first at Tufts, and now I'm over at MIT since 2009 as a senior lecturer, working with undergraduates primarily. And what we're able to do, and Riza has a similar background in that he has a strong industry background and teaches at MIT. We're able to synthesize the elements that are both, we know from the academic understanding, but also from the real hard-fought battles that you learn only when you're actually in industry. So we're able to bring things to life where we can understand the things that don't work that people think should work, and also the way to make it work more effectively when you're in industry and have to bring it back to your organization. So I'm just going to highlight a few key takeaways that people have when they leave this course. And I'm going to start with this, which is ultimately we develop skills and confidence to use a methodology. Now, this methodology is going to be very straightforward in some ways. You're going to find out what the needs are, understand about how to do research, who's affected, what you're limited by with boundaries, what can go wrong with hazards, how you create a vision for the future, coming up with ideas, reducing that down, creating prototypes to reduce uncertainty, and how you verify that at the end. Now, this isn't radically different than you'd see in any other kind of design process, except for some of the elements, which we think are really important. And we hover over those elements in the class. Things like a stakeholder phase. We used to call them a user phase, but stakeholders are actually a much bigger audience of people to keep track of and to be able to address. For example, if you make a toy for a kid, and one of my customers is Hasbro, the stakeholders are the child and the parent. If the parent doesn't like it, the child will never get that toy. And some stakeholders we have in business are people like the legal department, and that keeps you from getting a product launched. So we hover over this methodology in a slightly different way and make it come to life in a slightly different way as well. You learn things like the theory behind some of this stuff, like dominant design theory. And in class, we go over this, and it helps you predict and understand trends in businesses that you may not expect to see that are happening right now, and to understand how new entrants come from below. They come with worse performance in some levels, and they're the ones who take over these industries. And this is an image showing a cell phone industries, how that changed, the dominant design changed. And it's true about all these different technologies as well. So we cover over things that are not just practical, but also theory, try to balance that out together. And we have some interesting takeaways where you learn to think differently and see things differently, like recognizing the status quo and being able to pull it apart. And we use an example like this, where we show a picture of a camera. And the status quo is that You might think that to take a good picture, you need to have a big camera or look through the camera or be able to focus. And then we show how later on you don't actually need to do that because other technologies have, like GoPro, have challenged the status quo effectively. We show how you can start thinking with new perspectives. And at the end of a big section, we show this example where we ask you, and you can do this right now, can you see the dog in the back bottom right of this cube, or in the front top left of the cube, or in the front bottom right, or in the back top left? The two of them can be really hard to do once you start taking a look. And we really try to show you how if you use these techniques, you actually can see the world with different perspectives, metaphorically and actually, be able to solve problems you couldn't solve before. A participant said this, and I thought it was really nice quotation. So I'm just going to read you what he said, but tell you what happened. He said, I want you to know that you in the Innovation and Design Thinking course represented a significant moment, a breakthrough, real growth from product owner 1 to hydrogen equipment interface engineer to my current role, from promotion since September, 2 promotions since September, which is not typical. And what we talked about extensively with him afterwards is how this course allowed him to think differently, and he could start implementing the material immediately at work. So it wasn't that he was going to get skills or knowledge he could use later on. It's not just about learning about innovation. It's really developing the skills and the confidence to use them that allowed him to transform his career. So here's how it runs for 3 days, roughly. I've left out a few small things, but basically in day 1, we introduce the course, we set up the framework for people to understand what's going on. We talk about how to evaluate designs we see in the world, and that culminates with an understanding of the 10-step design process that I talked about. That process, we go into a lot of depth about that. We work in big groups, and then we work in small breakout groups. We go over the principles of good design, and then we do a case study. So you see these case studies are interspersed here. The Glad Force Flex, Burt's Bees, a British Dream. That's done where Riza has worked on these, and the case studies make these things come to life in really big ways. You'll also notice that we go through this, we have innovation of a large organization, so we don't just talk about innovation as an individual, how you create vision. And then we talk about things where we begin the next day with design challenges, leadership skills that you need to be innovative. So you could be inventive and come up with an idea, but if you don't have the leadership skills, you can't execute and make those things real. We go into deep dives on some things like stakeholder analysis and usability testing, as well as the psychology about how people work with media and machines and other people. And all this culminates into the end, which is on the 3rd day, where after open remarks, we have all the participants bring their own problems. And they're able to work in a small group of people and apply all these steps and get real feedback to know how to be able to make this go forward. And at the very end, we talked about some very interesting secrets of innovation. So some things to highlight are, there's time to map your learnings to your work. So as we go through this, we've built in these reflections, and that allows you to think, okay, how would I take this thing and map it to my work? And then ask questions of us so we can help connect the dots more effectively. And then there are a ton of small breakout groups. So you're always going to be working with people in different breakout groups. As a result, it's a great networking opportunity. You're able to talk to people from all over the world. We often have people coming from between 16 and 23 different countries in the world that join this class. And because it attracts so many different people from different industries, you get to see different approaches. And the networking effect is really valuable as well. So we make sure that we keep recombining people into these different groups, and allows people to then to learn from each other and to see different perspectives. And people often form connections that last for many, many years. And with that, I guess I'll open up to questions so we can talk about it, but I'd love to learn more about you and what questions you have and some of your backgrounds. So maybe, Sandro, could I find out more about you? What kind of industry are you in?
Hello.
What do you do? Hello.
Hello, how's it going? I'm from Brazil. I'm working in a large company, GXC Technology.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a CTO here. I have a lot of challenge. Now, my current challenge is transform the delivery team to be more up to date with the market and use agile, DevOps, SRE, okay, in terms of technology in general, software in general.
Fantastic. And so how big is your staff?
Uh, the direct staff is around 50 people,
Wow.
50, okay, now. But it's just one account. I want to spread it to 500 people
Wow.
in the
Okay.
next step.
So innovation must be really important if you have a CTO. You want to be able to drive new technologies and new processes. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you find that people in your organization challenge assumptions, challenge the status quo enough? Or do you think that they try to solve the problem that's in front of them?
In the large company like GXC, it's possible to find all kind of people, okay? And I think I have people more innovative, and some people follow the rules, etc. Okay, it's huge company.
If you could do anything to be able to have a magic wand and be able to transform their thinking, what would you want them to change about the way they work, or at least about large groups of them?
Yeah, I think we create some trackings or trails to give some concepts to everyone. I don't see any magic. I think it's a process. Culture is a process. You need to execute, and one day people change the vision.
It's interesting. We've noticed a lot of people when they take these courses, this particular course, they do change their thinking right away, and they're able to use these tools immediately at work, which is really nice because we want to make it very practical so they can walk away being able to implement them immediately. That's one of the core values, I think, here. And so perhaps some people in your organization as well would find that useful.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I was wondering, Senator, do you have a process that you use for how people should approach innovation that's articulated, or do you have one that's kind of?
I think it depends. Normally, depends on customer because we are work together customers, and normally I create some like garages to customer, separate organization or separate group to execute some innovation. Okay, I think design think help us to start the ideas. Okay, and I think it depends on the customer. If normally GXC provide the resources and understand the customer objectives and targets, etc., and create it this environment to create innovation in general.
Fantastic. It sounds like a lot of opportunities for growth in the next several years. Particularly if you're increasing your staff from 50 to 500.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I think.
What questions do you have, or does anyone else have on the call?
I have a question. You mentioned in your presentation that from the quote from the student saying that it helped transform his career.
Yeah.
And I see the applications in terms of like innovating a product strategy for an organization, but could you kind of sort of explain how it helps students as professionals, as young professionals, maybe without the leadership position that you can, implement these processes from a top-down perspective? How do you do it from the bottom up?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So, there's a lot of ways you can transform both an organization and a company. In general, what you need is, in this case, this person, he was a mid-level person. He had a lot of passion for what he was working on with energy. And he needed a way to think differently to be able to kind of pop to that next level, right? He had all the passion and he knew the technical material really, really well. And what he needed to do was be able to bring something in to his organization so that he could think differently, but also the people around him, at his level would think differently, and they could create something different. So by having him understand a few things, the actual skills of innovation that include the leadership skills, he started combining those two a lot. And he was able to then transform the way his team worked and what he saw as opportunities. And because he was in this part of the company where they're really trying to figure out what to do with energy, he was able to then articulate with much clearer vision to senior levels as to where they could go. So part of this for him was vision creation and understanding the stakeholders in a more profound way enabled him to connect with people at much higher levels of the organization. Because of that, he got new opportunities and has started to build out his team and organization. So now he's that kind of leader who's able to push both these kinds of processes, ideas through, and combine it with leadership skills. And I think that's what happens a lot is that, someone, obviously you want people who are passionate. You hire for passion, you hire for knowledge and technical ability. And when you get someone who can take that and be able to combine it with this rigorous approach and say, we now have an approach that we understand, that we can articulate for something that we've been innovative before, but now we can articulate it more clearly and add in the leadership skills that you need to be able to execute on these innovation aspects. That's what really we see a lot of transformation happening then. And that's certainly what happened with him.
That's interesting because you also touched on the point that you have the ability to affect the organization on micro level within your team. And if your team becomes a better performing team or a top performing team, that, proof is in the pudding, and that kind of like makes, your organization, your leadership look at what you're doing differently and how that can be implemented across the board.
That's exactly right. You can take a small group and all of a sudden if that group is operating differently, and people will see that. Adjacent groups will see that. People above them will see it, people below them will see it, but that group will start operating differently. And if that output becomes valuable, people try to figure out, what are you doing that's different? And that's when it becomes an opportunity for that group to start taking on more, leading more. We've had people from Bose take this, and that group has really expanded continuously. Even while other groups have kind of shrunk, that group's expanded continuously because they're the ones thinking about the future in a very different way. And because they have a rigorous process that they can use and refer to, they're able to extend that value. They've been extending it a lot, which is wonderful. Sandra, are you developing products, Sandra, or are you developing services, or both?
In services.
Services, yeah, interesting. So for what this material is really applicable to both a traditional product, whether it's a physical or digital product, as well as services together. We don't really make a distinction between that, even though you did see a lot of those company brand names talk a lot about product development. But you also mentioned using Agile. Is that right?
Yes, right.
Do you find that Agile allows you to really be innovative, or do you find that it's a little bit at odds with Agile is more about execution versus innovation?
I think Agile can be applicable in all things.
Yeah.
To execute, to innovate, but I use more to execute.
Yeah.
My job it's more about execution than because I believe that the strategy is about execution. Okay,
Yeah,
because in the past I just make a strategy, plans, roadmaps, etc., and then a couple of years from now, I changed my approach to execution. Okay, I want to see the final results and see things executing in the result to customer. This is my way to work now, and then this kind of training for me, I think, can help me to open my mind, and I think training generates moments to learn and to understand ways to change some mindsets. And I love to study all the time. All the time I have things to learn with another people. This is my way.
A lot of companies who are doing this kind of product development work often find that it's hard to include innovation as part of an agile process. But I think it's definitely possible to do, but you have to run the process a little bit differently. I see that Puneet joined. Hi, Puneet, can you hear us okay?
So question, and a little, I'm going to tag Sandra in this, but I have a question about, you've worked with huge organizations, right? Because, we saw all the brands that were on your screen. what do smaller organizations that maybe not have as many resources, like Sandro has 50 people right now, even though he's growing,
Yeah,
what can they do to innovate with limited resources?
that's a great question. It's actually one of the most important ones. That's really insightful. It's funny, when you have limited resources and you need to innovate, we have an advanced concepts section of this course where we can talk about it. What we do is we really think about how you understand what makes the thing valuable. So often people believe they understand the problem because they have a problem space. We need to deliver this system to this customer. And that's often true. But when you need to innovate and change the way you're doing it, then that becomes a time where you need to step back and use the same process that we teach about product development to understanding the problem space. And really what we found is, and we've done a lot of research on this, in a project where you're trying to get everything done, imagine you had 2 weeks to get something done, you'd expect that after the first week, you'd be about 50% of the way done. And that's with the Agile Scrum, you figure if you have to limit it, time box it by 2 months, after the first month, you want to be about halfway done with your stuff. But we know for innovation, it doesn't work this way at all. That for when you're doing something big innovation, you spend so much time really understanding the depth of the problem, if you're doing it right, that you only get about 10% of the stuff done or 15% about halfway through. But if you do it right, then you start accelerating much faster. And so by using this technique early on, you start able to really understand the problem space with a lot more fidelity and clarity than anybody else does. And then you start moving much faster. And you start that iterative process of research, design, and test goes much faster. And that's where it becomes a hugely valuable approach when you have limited resources, because you get everyone focused. It just requires a bit of courage. That's kind of a leadership skill, because if you're not courageous, you don't want to say, uh-oh, halfway through, we don't have much to show for it. Because you need to understand that halfway through, you've done a lot of work and you think very differently. And that's where the value is. So it's really, it's about having, that's a leadership. That's why we combine leadership skills so explicitly. If you don't have courage, then you will expect people to have created something, and they will create something, but it won't be the thing they need, which is really a deep shared understanding. Can you imagine if Apple knew exactly what the iPhone was supposed to be on day one, and all they do is execute? That'd be easy. But to get to that point and say, well, we want to make a phone because we don't like phones and everyone has them. Everyone has an iPod, and we have a circle thing, so you could kind of dial, and people are working now on making a phone using the dial pad on an iPod, but they can't make it work well. It's too complicated. And there's another group who's projecting OS 10 onto a big giant surface because they're tracking hand motion. And the developer says, I can put 2 hands and do things with 2 hands. So instead of just one, I can pinch and stretch and zoom into maps. Look how amazing it is on a big surface. And another group at Apple is working on like a tablet computer, but they can't make it because glass that's this big for touchscreens is too expensive, because the way they print glass, giant sheets of glass are cut into these sections. And if you were to print glass like this, if you were to make glass this big, you actually have so much waste, you couldn't make it cost effective. So the brilliance was Steve Jobs seeing all these different things, combining them together, being able to understand what could happen. And then they still had to figure out what to do. And that whole process is the beginning. Not much to see, but once you get that orientation and alignment, you start going much faster. And now that we have Puneet back, I don't know, Puneet, can you hear us?
Yeah, Blade.
Oh, good. Good. You're a little bit quiet. I'm going to turn my volume up.
Okay. At that time, like my network was very low. That's why. Sorry for that. Yeah.
No problem at all. Thank you. You're all set. What kind of organization do you have, Puneet?
So right now I'm only working with a small club community. I'm a student right now based on the college, but I'm more into like building products and making a community based ecosystem so that everyone can help it out. So the only thing that I wanted to ask to you is how can we think of making something which is already there, but we want to change. How to explain? Like I want to modify it something, but it's already there. Like people are using it, but I have something different take on that particular point. So how can I pitch it, and how can I make my product usable to the mass audience?
Yeah, well,
What's your
that is exactly what we talk about in this course. We talk about how you create vision so that people can understand it better and want it, and you can understand if they even want this thing. We talk about how you reduce uncertainty by usability testing and working with people so you can see, does this new concept actually become effective? Is it going to work? Is it going to satisfy the problem? And we talk about stakeholder analysis to make sure you understand exactly what the people that you're trying to address need and how you benefit them. And in this process, we help you even challenge the assumptions about a concept that you might have going forward. So I think that what you're asking is exactly what we cover in the course about how to think about taking something, improving it in a big way, and doing it with a very easy to understand process and a lot of rigor.
Okay. Nice.
Wow. Blade, thank you so much for this conversation and giving us some insight into the course and what's coming up. I wanted to give an opportunity to introduce you guys to Luke McNeil. He is the program administrator for this course. So he's going to share with you some registration tips.
Hi, everyone. So I am the one who's in charge of basically processing all your registrations and helping guide you to actually getting enrolled in this course. I'm going to put the link for the course page in the chat if you don't already have it. Basically, the process is you go to the web page, fill out a short application form, including your contact information, your recent work experience, and importantly, your goals for the course. We like to know what you want to learn. We want to make sure that your needs are addressed, and we want to make sure that this is indeed the course for you. And within 3 business days, typically, and typically within 24 hours, actually, we get back to you with an acceptance decision, and we take it from there. If you have any questions at all, I'll also include our contact email address in the chat. So you're always welcome to send us any questions about either the course itself or the registration process.